Okay, so just to talk you through all the bits of kit that you're going to need to make these bracelets. First of all, I'm using a bead mat. You obviously don't need to use one of these. I'm not expecting everybody to have one of these, but what you can use instead is if you've got a fleece blanket. Most people have a fleece blanket. This is something that you can use instead to put your beads on, just to stop them from rolling over on the table. So if you've got a piece of fleece, or if you've got a fleece jumper or anything that you could use to stop the beads rolling around, that's what you could use. To do the threading of your bracelet, you will need to use something to lean on. So I'm going to be using a clipboard with one of these kind of bits at the top, if you can see. So I'm going to be using a clipboard. But you could also use, if you don't have a clipboard, just a chopping board. So as long as it's not too thick. But you will need some of these Bulldog clips as well to help you secure your leather and thread on. And you'll probably need a Bulldog clip at the front, the top and the bottom. Okay, so you could use that. On my actual mats, the actual bits that you need. So starting with the leather, so this is what you will be sewing your beads onto. This is a round leather cord. This leather is 2mm thick, and I've cut about just under a metre of leather, which should go around my wrist a couple of times. So that's leather cord, and this one is 2mm thick, but 1mm would be fine as well. Some thread, so I've got some here, I've got some KO thread and some Nymo thread. Doesn't matter which you use, they're both nice beading threads. So it's your choice really, or whatever you can get hold of. So I've got some thread. You'd want the thread to match the colour of your leather, unless you want the look of the thread around the leather. I'm using white as a contrast so that when I'm threading, hopefully you'll be able to see that a bit more easily. Okay, so that's the leather, that's the thread. Beading needles. These are special needles specifically for beading. They're very fine and flexible. These ones are size 10 to 12s. They're called pony needles. You can get these in lots of different places. I will put some links as to where you can find all of these bits and pieces so that you know where you can get them from. So beading needles, a pair of scissors, some glue. This is Hypo cement glue. This is something that is used in jewellery. It's a flexible glue, and we will use just a dab of this on any knots that we make. If you don't have this, you could use some clear nail varnish if you wanted to. Then onto the actual beads themselves. So I've got 15 here of each type of bead. And they're all 6mm in size. So these are druzy beads in this beautiful blue. These are fire polish in kind of a crystal silver colour. And then these are a semi-precious stone. These are adventurine blue, which I thought went quite nicely with the others. And then finally, you will need a button with a shank on the end. So this is the one, just so you can see that you've got the hole, which is where you will be threading your leather, and that forms your clasp. You would need one of those as well. Okay, so those are all the bits and pieces that we need. So to start off with, you are going to want to start with your leather. So using your shank bead, you need to thread your leather through the hole in the shank bead and take that leather down until the shank bead is sitting halfway. Oh, what I haven't shown you is that actually when you measure your leather, you need to make sure that you've got enough to do however many wraps you want around there. So I'm going to do about 2 wraps. So fold it in half because you'll be sewing the beads in between the two, and just wrap it around your wrist, and you just need to make sure that you've got some extra at the end. Okay, so that looks about right to me for two wraps. So that's how you measure, and you just cut it off where you want it to be. A little bit more is better than too short in this instance. Okay, so we'll try again. So we'll go back through the shank bead, shank button, halfway down, and then you want to clip that onto your board. So I'm going to get my, move these out of the way for now and clip them onto my board. So here's my board, and I'm just going to tuck my shank bead underneath that clip so that it's held secure at the top there. And then I'm going to bring it down so it's nice and straight, and I'm going to wrap it underneath the board, and then using my Bulldog clip, and I've got a piece of kitchen roll just to protect the leather, and I'm just going to clip that onto the board. So that's what you will have. Okay, so the shank bead is secure at the top. This is nice and straight, and then it's secured at the bottom by the Bulldog clip with this protecting it. If you are using a board like this, you just clip it at the top and clip it at the bottom so you have the same, Okay, the next really important thing to tell you is your thread. When you cut your thread, you want to do quite a long piece if you can, but don't worry, you can always add afterwards. So only cut a size as long as you think you can cope with. If you go too long, it's going to get quite tangled, so you need to just be happy with the length that you're working with. When you have cut your thread, you need to condition your thread. So what I mean by that is when it comes off the spool, you'll see, I don't know if you can see that on here, that it's really quite wriggly. It's come off and it's all curly. Now that's going to knot really easily. So to help with that, you basically go from one end of the thread to the other, and you literally tug it and pull it. And what that does is that helps to reduce all the crinkles in your thread. And you go all the way along. Just keep going until you reach the end. And then when you've reached the end, go back the other way, so that you're giving it a really good tug. And I promise you, if you don't do this, you're going to regret it, because you will get knots in your thread much more easily. Give it a good tug all the way along until you come to the end, and then you need to thread your needle. Now I cheated here and I did it off camera because sometimes they can be a bit tricky to thread. So thread your needle with your thread, and then use your fleece to just kind of, if you can see, I'm going to use my fleece, and I'm just going to use that just to pop my needle in, just so that it's there and I know where it is. And then at this point I'm going to find the end of the thread, and you are going to tie a knot around one side of the leather. So I'm just, nothing special about the knot, you just need to tie a knot so it's nice and secure. I'm just going to do that. So there's one. I'm going to do it again. And do as many knots as you think to make it nice and secure. I'll probably just do a couple. Okay, so that's my thread now on. Okay, so my thread is nicely attached, and I'm just going to push it up towards the shank button. So my knot is nicely at the top of where the shank button is. And then we can basically just start to bead. So I've got my beads here. Move them this way around so you can see them. So here they are. And I think I'm going to start with my nice blue beads. Okay, so we've got the thread, and I'm going to attach one bead, just thread one bead and take it down, just being careful because it will get a long piece of thread, it's going to get caught in places. So just do this slowly and carefully. Bring it down to the end. Now what you want to do is to get it sort of sitting in the middle, if you can see that, sitting in the middle between the two bits of leather. Okay, and at the moment the thread is coming over the top of this second piece of leather, and I'm just going to go round underneath just that first one, that first leather, like so. And once you've gone underneath, you should then be coming out of the middle, and you want to go back through your bead. Now this is where I hold on to my bead at this point just to keep it in place, and I just pull really gently with my thread. And the first few are always the trickiest, and you want to take your time and get them secure. So I've gone through the bead, around under that first leather, and then back through the bead, and it's just currently just coming out of that bead. And then you want to fully capture it, so you're going to go round the second of the leather and just come up through the middle. And you've captured that first bead now in between the two bits of leather. And now it's time for bead number 2. So I'm just going to pick up the second bead, add that on, thread it onto my thread, and place it where I want it to go. So it needs to sit nicely against that first bead. Okay, so pull it so there's no gaping here, but you don't want it to be so tight that it's pulling on the leather. You want it to be firm but not really tight. You want it to be nicely against the first bead. So again, we go around this piece of leather and come back up through the middle, and gently pull the thread, and then back through the center of that bead that you've just added. Again, hold onto your bead with your finger. If it's easier, put your needle down. So again, I use my mat, and I just poke my needle in the mat so it's out of the way, but I know where it is, and just gently pull until the thread is firm but not too tight. So you're coming out, so you've gone round this one, you've gone through the bead, and you're just sitting on top of this other piece of leather now. So again, you want to go round that leather. So you're basically doing a figure 8 through the leather, around the leather. So back into the middle, and you can add on your next bead. So popping the next bead on, and then slowly and carefully pull the thread and move that third bead into a nice position round the leather. until you come into the centre. Back through the bead you've just added. Hold on to that bead, keep it in its place, popping my needle down and pulling my thread. Trying really hard not to get it caught and tangled up, which is why it's better to do this slowly. If you start going really quick, that's when problems occur and you get tangled up. Okay, so that's bead number 3 added, and that's how we do it. So we'll do a few more. So going under the leather, adding my bead, positioning it where I want it to be, under the leather and back through that bead, holding that bead tight and pull until it's in place. And again, under the leather, through the bead, carefully positioning it into place, under the leather, through the bead, pull it in place. Under the leather, adding the bead and carefully pulling through, positioning in place. Now if they start to move a bit, you can just kind of position them a bit, just sort of roll them up. You can do that. You should still be able to move them and roll them around. Back under the leather, through the bead, hold it in place and pull. Under the leather, adding the bead, under the leather, back through that bead and holding it in place. Okay, so I'm going to carry on doing that. So I've got a few more blue beads and then I shall probably go to my silver beads and then add on my blue adventuring beads. And I'll come back and show you what to do when you've finished adding your beads. If you run out of thread, all you need to do is, in the same way that you added the thread before, just make a knot. So if you just go round with your thread and then capture it underneath so that you're kind of making a loop, you go through the loop so you can make your knot. Just do that a couple of times to get a nice knot, and then you can snip, do it nice and tight, you can snip it off, and then you can add thread in exactly the same way as we did when we started. So that's how you add thread if you run out of thread along the way. Okay, I'm going to come back to you when I've finished the rest of this bracelet.